Hello everyone, welcome to this short webinar looking at the effects of COVID-19 on the athlete. Before I go any further, my name is Dr. Ara Supaya and I want to thank my team at Orico, in particular our CEO Brian and the two scientists over there, Nathan Lewis and Charlie Padler, for educating and allowing me to share this material with all of you. Who is COVID? COVID is an unstable RNA virus. Viruses fall into two groups. DNA viruses, like your chickenpox viruses, when they replicate and there's a mistake, they can correct it. And so mutations are much rarer. RNA viruses can't do that. So we have two problems with these viruses. One is it mutates. Secondly, because of that, difficult to find a vaccine, although we're working on it. And immunity, whether you have lifelong immunity, duration of immunity, difficult to assess right now. The unique thing about this virus is how it attacks the cell. Instead of attacking it directly, it attaches itself to this molecule called ACE2 and then enters the cell that way. And once it enters the cell, let's say it does that to me and I have it and I meet you and we are very close, we high five, we do something. I transmit the virus to you and then it starts replicating within you. For about 5 to 10 days, you will have no symptoms. That's called the incubation period. Again, that's a big problem with this virus because in that time, because you feel so great, you will go on and talk to other people and spread the viruses inadvertently to other people. And then it reaches a critical level when it attacks your lungs particularly and causes an infection. And that's when you seek medical advice. That incubation period is a big problem here. And that's why social distancing absolutely works and it's not a hoax. If you go back to the beginning when you and I met, if we were 6 feet apart, I can't transmit the virus to you. And so the virus stays with me. After 14 days, goes away and we're done. That's why social distancing is so important. The other thing about this virus, it has a lipid covering. It's like a greasy covering. So if you imagine doing your dishes, greasy dishes, soap takes it off. Washing your hands with soap is doing exactly the same thing. It's killing the virus. So those two things, they don't sound like very much, but they absolutely work. Social distancing and hand washing with regular soap. When we test for this virus, we do a nasal swab. And what that does, it looks for live viruses. And if it's positive, it tells me that you have the infection now. If it's negative, it tells me you don't have the virus now, but doesn't tell me if you had the virus previously. The only way to know that is to look for antibodies through serology and blood tests, which is now only done in the hospital for the very sick patients. Symptoms, most people don't have symptoms. The most common symptoms that we're seeing is fever, cough, and shortness of breath. And about 10% of people actually do have diarrhea and vomiting. And personally, I think these people knew something and they are the hoarders of all the toilet paper out there. You know who you are. Okay, but more on a serious note, I divide the symptoms to below the neck and above the neck. And you'll see why that's important later on, okay? And there's a question whether or not loss of smell and taste is part of all the symptoms. There is a strong suggestion that if this is something that came on suddenly during this pandemic, worth seeking medical advice. Now, athletes in general have a lower immunity because, as you can see for yourself, all of these factors, heavy exercise, long haul flights, environmental extremes. And I typically divide this into psychological factors and physical factors. And I'll go through this separately at a time, one at a time. If you're an athlete, the second most common cause for missed days in training is a viral infection. So now is absolutely not a time to get sick, okay? Do everything you can to avoid exposure. So like I said, hand sanitizing, washing your hands, social distancing. Do whatever you can to not pick up this virus. When it comes to training, I get asked this a lot, and this is something I want to share with you. This is actually from the paper that will be attached to this webinar. And if you look at it, this is a beautiful, beautiful demonstration. It looks at the amount of exercise that we do with illness risk and immunosurveillance. And moderate exercise, meaning less than an hour and moderate intensity, reduces your risk and increases your immunosurveillance. What is immunosurveillance? Two things. Your immune cells becoming more mobile and more active, more awake, and the immune cells that are specifically good at picking up viruses, they start moving, shifting from the blood to your tissue. That's called priming the immune system, which is what you want, okay? That happens at moderate exercise. Now watch how it happens. If you increase it to heavy intensity, your risk goes up because your immunosurveillance goes down. And if you go really high, like marathon running, ultra marathon training, you overload the system, okay? And you really run the risk of getting sick. Interestingly, they studied 80-year-olds in Sweden, 80. And what they found was older people have a unique immune profile signature, unique to older people, not seen in younger people. And the reason I'm bringing this up is ultra marathoners, long distance running, endurance athletes seem to have that same immune signature as the elderly population, okay? And you don't want that right now. So when it comes to training, here's my advice. You want to keep in the moderate phase, okay? So that's your maintenance phase. And I suggest doing short spikes rather than long haul, long distance running. And every third week, put in a recovery week, okay? And if you need to increase your intensity, 5 to 10% and volume, 5 to 10% a week at a time. Like that's it. Don't try to do more than that. And then absolutely avoid drastic changes in body composition. Now is not a time to get shredded by training really hard and cutting back on calories. That will hammer and downregulate your immune system. You don't want that. All right, when it comes to diet, carbs. Listen, your immune cells need energy. What they've shown is, you know that window where right after prolonged exercise, more than 90 minutes or high intensity, your immunity drops, your inflammation goes up? Well, carbs have been shown to prevent that. There's a lot of argument, and well, it's a contentious topic in sports, but if it's me, I will absolutely consume carbs. If you want to stay in ketosis, you can time your carbs. A small amount of carbs won't take you out of ketosis. Calories should meet demand. Again, like I said, your immune cells need energy. If you bump up your training and cut back on your calories to change your body composition right now, that is not a good idea. You will downregulate and hurt your immune system. When it comes to protein, I want a balance of everything. Branched chains, glutamine, very, very important for gut immunity. Cysteine makes glutathione. So all of that helps boost the immune system. Protein will help your immune cells become more mobile. 1 gram per kilogram per body weight per day, okay? And then omega-3s, these are your essential fatty acids. Essential meaning you can't get it from your, you can't make it, you can only get it from your diet. Two particular ones, DHA and EPA. When you train, you absorb DHA better. EPA competes with arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid causes inflammation, and EPA comes to balance that out, okay? And those two molecules are called SPMs. They are precursors for SPMs. SPM stands for specific pro-resolving mediators, and these are fairly new molecules that have been found to turn off chronic inflammation. I'll do a whole webinar on that, but that's why omega-3s right now, very, very important. And the same goes for flavonoids. These are your green teas, your raw vegetables, your fruits, high in antioxidants, high in minerals. They absolutely will save you during this time. 6 to 8 servings a day though, okay? When it comes to hydration, most athletes know about hydration. What I will say is that in your saliva, you have a molecule called IgA. Because athletes as a group generally have lower immunity, they tend to have less IgA in their mouth. But they compensate for that by increasing the amount of saliva that they produce. If you're dehydrated, that compensation is lost. So make sure you stay hydrated. Whatever you weigh in pounds, drink half of that, half of their body weight in ounces of water. When it comes to supplement, this is something that I get asked a lot. I'm going to bring up this 4. Okay, vitamin D, if it's low and you boost it up and your vitamin D is normal, 40% risk reduction in getting sick. Super important. But if your levels are normal, don't take more, because high levels of vitamin D dampens the immune system, so you don't want that. Vitamin C, been studied with military personnel, endurance athletes, typically downhill skiers, marathon runners, and it's been shown to like 50% risk reduction in catching a cold. But like I said, it's only been studied in there. Me personally, I think right now, probably worth taking it, even though it's not been studied for everybody. Zinc, the lozenge, zinc acetate and zinc glycinate, really, really important right now. In America, it's called Zicam. That thing stops viral replication, especially in your mouth. And the key to that zinc lozenge is to allow it to dissolve in your mouth. Don't chew it. Okay? And the other key thing with it is, if you get symptoms, take it as soon as possible and take it every 4 hours. 1 lozenge every 4 hours. Okay? Elderberry syrup, this is very interesting. And you remember how I said the virus attaches itself to the ACE molecule and then enters the cell? Elderberry syrup, 1000 milligrams, has been shown to reduce the amount of attachment. So this combination may be very useful. Elderberry syrup really only been studied for durations of 12 weeks at a time, so I can't comment for anything more than that. But right now, 1000 milligrams or 12 weeks, probably worth looking at. And then Professor Gleason did a ton of work on probiotics. He looked at the incidence of colds in athletes training in winter, and those who took probiotics, significant reduction in cold symptoms and catching a cold. In particular, 2 strains have been shown to be really useful: Lactobacillus casei and Streptococcus thermophilus. And what I will tell you is the liquid form, the over-the-counter form, is much better tolerated by the gut than the pill form. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Sleep, as you know, I'm a big proponent of sleep. Chronic sleep disturbance does 2 things. The second one, it is a big cause of inflammation within the body, which the immune system does not like. The second thing is, just like your circadian rhythm, as a person you have a circadian rhythm, the cells, the immune cells, have a circadian rhythm. So, for example, the natural killer cell, it's most active when you're in deep sleep between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And this is the cell that goes around identifying cancer cells and viruses, okay? So if you're sleep deprived or sleep disturbed, you disturb the immune cell's circadian rhythm, which is not what you want right now, okay? Interestingly enough, what the studies have shown is, if you can get more sleep, you will actually improve your muscular performance. So I know a lot of my athletes now are saying, you know, when they're at home, they go, man, I get more sleep when I'm traveling, because now I got to, like, oh, my kids want me, there's a lot of things to be done. I get it, but try as much as possible to get more sleep, because look at what it does. Okay, big boost. And naps absolutely count. So maybe one strategy is to get a family nap together, right? Now, this is a part that Dr. Richard Simpson did phenomenal work on astronauts, and what he showed was, when they were isolated in space, the International Space Station, they started reactivating viruses within them. Isolation increases your cortisol and has a really profound effect on your immune system. It downregulates your immune system. So we are at a stage right now when a lot of athletes may have to face this. So if you are going through this, really important to connect with others and talk to others, especially, you know, athletes who need the drive for competition. And if you don't have that, you lose the motivation to train, and you don't see the purpose, because nobody knows when this is going to end. This is a very difficult time. There's no shame in talking about this. And then response to boredom, listen, you're either going to exercise super hard, which I showed you earlier has its own drawbacks, or you might comfort eat. Listen, I do this, you do this, and when it happens and it gets excessive, we need to ask for help. Two things that you can do. Mindfulness practice is really interesting. Mindfulness practice doesn't necessarily mean yoga. It means anything that allows your mind to calm down. So doing nothing, going for a walk, just being on your own is hugely beneficial. In fact, they've shown that mindfulness practice in people with high stress jobs reduces the number of influenza cases in those people. So that's how powerful that is. And then breath work, anything that, like box breathing, anything that can down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system, the fright and flight response, and boost up the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system, is hugely beneficial on the immune system. Okay, so super important. And then I'm going to touch on this briefly. If you are a Winter Olympic athlete or staying somewhere where in altitude or cold, prolonged exposure to cold and persistent hypoxia really down-regulates the immune system. And in particular, like your nostrils, they want to stay at 37 degrees Celsius. When it drops down to 33 in that cavity, you get severe symptoms of the cold and URI symptoms, okay? So you really want to prevent that. But short intermittent cold and hypoxic exposure, particularly the cold, like cryo chambers or ice baths, really beneficial right now in boosting your immune system. But again, keep this under 10 minutes. If you do get infected, here's what I'll tell you. Isolate yourself, but deal with isolation. Wash your hands, sanitize everywhere around you. Chances are you'll do completely fine, 14 days, and then you're out of there, okay? The question is, should you exercise even if you're isolating? And Neil Walsh, his attitude is if you have a viral infection, do not exercise. Others say do exercise. My question is this. If you have symptoms, what are your symptoms? Are they below the neck or above the neck? If it's above the neck, I'm okay with you exercising. If it's below the neck, do not exercise. The shortness of breath that you have may be from pneumonia, or it might be the heart. The virus has been known to infect the heart, causing myocarditis, and if you try to push the heart at that stage, there is a real risk of dropping down dead from arrhythmias. Yes, that's meant to sound scary. That's the whole point. You won't know. So if you have symptoms below the neck, do not exercise. And 14 days without any training, ease back into it, because as tough as you guys are, you will be deconditioned. Okay? And that's basically it. This is my summary. A couple of things, again, wash your hands, social distancing, recovery week every third week. I prefer you to do short spikes rather than long duration. And then, intermittent exposure to cold, super useful. This are the sources. This one paper, this the other paper, and then like I said, my team at from Orico, Nathan Lewis, Charlie Pedler, super useful in educating me. And I hope this is useful to you, and I'll speak to you soon.